scriptures. You can write it here. Let me give you a couple of things. One is going to be 2 Peter chapter 3. You can write that down. 2 Peter chapter 3, 6 through 7, and then 10 through 13. And also, after 2 Peter, you can be writing down Revelation chapter 21. Revelation chapter 21, 1 through 4. I want to share these verses with you. I'm not asking you to turn there. They're not going to be on the screen, but I want to share them with you to let you see what's coming after what we're studying about. We're going to talk about Armageddon a little bit. That's in our text. It's coming up. But before all that, what you got to understand that's happening here is God is going to burn all this up. You say, I don't like that. Well, there's a lot of things I don't like, but the Bible says that's one of the things coming. There are different and varying perspectives on the final destruction of the earth coming out of where we are in Revelation right now. I told y'all a few weeks ago, there's no end of the earth. It's the end of the world. There's no end. That's not a biblical thing. But there is a remaking. There's a new heaven and a new earth. So let me give you a little bit of that. Peter chapter 3, 6 through 7 says, through these the world at that time perished when it was flooded by water. So when God judged the earth the first time, He brought the flood. Noah's Ark, the flood, all that. Okay? You learned some of that in Sunday school. All right. And then verse 7 says, but when it was flooded by water, verse 6 says that, but by the same word, the present heavens and earth are held in store for fire. Not water, but fire. Being kept until the day of judgment. That's where we're headed in Revelation. And the destruction of ungodly men. Now we jump to verse 10, it says, but the day of the Lord will come like a thief. So when Jesus comes back, we're talking about the second coming of Jesus, is going to be like a thief. We're not talking about the rapture, we're talking about the second coming. So in the second coming of Jesus will be like a thief, in verse 10, on that day, here it is, the heavens will pass away with a loud noise, the elements will burn and be dissolved, and the earth and the works of it will be disclosed. Verse 11, since all these things are to be destroyed in this way, it is clear what sort of people you should be in holy conduct and godliness. What did he say? He said, God's going to burn it all up, so how should you act? Godly. Don't worry about all this stuff. Don't worry about money. Don't worry about these things. Don't worry about what you're going to eat, what you're going to wear, what you're going to do. He takes care of, there's not a sparrow that falls to the ground, the lilies of the valley, or all that stuff Jesus talked about over and over. So how should we be? We should be godly in conduct. Verse 12, as you wait for and earnestly desire the coming of the day of God, okay, because of which the heavens will be on fire and be dissolved, and the elements will melt with heat. But based on His promise, we wait for what? New heavens and new earth where righteousness will dwell. So you go, what is all that, Peter? I mean, my goodness, you just pulled that right out of left field. Well, in Revelation 21, we get a little more detail. I know these aren't our text, but this is the foundation. It's a lot hotter on this side than on this side. I got the air's on over here and the heat's on over here because y'all were freezing to death over here and y'all were sweating over here. I'm going to stand over here. We're going to have a thunderstorm right in the middle of it. I'm thinking the elements are burning up here right now. Verse 21, chapter 21, 1 through 4 of Revelation. Then I saw, here we go, a new heaven and a new earth. For the first heaven and the first earth, that's the one we're on. For the first heaven and the first earth had passed away. That's all that stuff Peter was talking about. And the sea exists no longer. Verse 2, I also saw a holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared like a bride adorned for her husband. This is where I tell you, all that description about heaven with gold and streets and pearly gates and all that stuff, that's not talking about heaven, that's talking about a city, the New Jerusalem that comes down out of heaven, to the new earth the new heaven and new earth, because this one's going to pass away. God prepared like a bride adorned for her husband. Okay, and then verse 3. Then I heard a loud voice from the throne. So God's speaking from the throne. Look, God's dwelling is with men. So things are going to be different. It's going to be a lot like Eden. Somebody said it's like the remaking of the Garden of Eden. It got messed up. It got tarnished. God's not through with that idea or that concept. He's going to remake Eden on earth. Remember Him walking with Adam and Eve and being with them and all that stuff? And He will live with them, and they will be His people, and God Himself will be with them and be their God. And this is the famous verse at every funeral. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes. Okay. So, what we got going on back at Revelation 16, there's a long way of getting there, is this is a various perspective. This is a perspective of the final destruction of heaven and earth as we know it. God is bringing judgment upon the earth. Okay. So now let's look at verse 12. The sixth angel poured out his bowl. We're in 16, verse 12 of Revelation. And the great river Euphrates, and its waters was dried up, to prepare the way for the kings of the east. Verse 13. And I saw coming out of the mouth of the dragon, out of the mouth of the beast, out of the mouth of the false prophet, 3 unclean spirits like frogs. Okay. That's all weird stuff. Well, let's back up a second and talk about verse 12. The day Babylon were saved, because the river, Euphrates River, was like a barrier between them and their enemies, and the enemies coming over and attacking them. So they felt like that was symbolically, it could be saying that have a war. Not literally, symbolic that God is about to remove the hedge of protection away from that area against Babylon. And when we talk about Babylon, we're often talking about the Roman Empire, Babylon. The day of Tower of Babel was the pride of man when they rebelled against God in the Old Testament. So in Revelation, you get Babylon being mentioned. It doesn't necessarily mean Babylon, Iran, Iraq. It could just be talking about the rebellious, prideful hearts of men. Okay? Because we're about to have a war between men and God. But it could be literal, that the Euphrates River begins at Turkey, it goes to Mount Ararat, and it flows through the Persian Gulf. The river has been dividing east from the west. That's the way this works. And then in verse 12, you got this being cleared out, basically, so a vast army can now cross over. Prepare the way for the kings from the east. That's where they come marching in for battle, and we end up coming up soon, Armageddon. But who's behind all this? If we got a drying up, whether it's symbolic or it's literal, a drying up of the Euphrates River, and it can be either one. I can work with either one myself. But if we're talking about a literal war, it's going to be a literal drying up. But what? Unclean spirits like frogs. Well, one, that connects to Exodus chapter 8 with Moses and them and the frogs, okay? Part of the plagues. These are plagues in the book of Revelation. So these are demon spirits, evil spirits. Some versions say unclean spirits, some versions say evil spirits. They're demonic. Okay. So we've got these demonic spirits who are no longer being held back. So if Satan could kill you, you'd be dead. God has not allowed him to just wipe us off the face of the earth. There are some limitations to the old devil and the demons. You can invite them in. You can cause drama for yourself. I believe in spiritual warfare, and I believe in demonic oppression, and I have experienced possession with a person before. I've gone through a lot of those things in my time in ministry. I've seen some messed up stuff that can only be explained that, you try to say, is it mental illness? Is it demonic? Is it both? Is it demonic because of, you try to be careful, because everything, two mistakes said, one, you'd say everything's the devil, or two, you say nothing's the devil. You can't do that. It's somewhere in there. These are demons. And they're going to influence the world powers. That's kind of like what goes on now. But their restrictions, whatever restrictions are upon them in our time, which sometimes doesn't feel like a lot, but there's some kind of restriction because you and I are breathing. So there's some kind of protection. That's going to go away. And these spirits are going to, when this judgment is poured out and these frogs, these demons come of the unholy trinity. We've got the unholy trinity going on here. The dragon, the beast, the false prophet, Father, Son, Holy Ghost. The devil's always copying the things of God. And these unclean spirits are going to be allowed to be in some coalition with the armies of men. Because you think, it doesn't make sense for people in tanks and airplanes and jets and fighter whatevers to say, we're going to wage war against God. That doesn't make sense. So are we talking symbolically, metaphorically, or are we talking spiritual realm stuff that we don't fully understand? Well, when they go to war with God, a lot of the indication is they're going to war with Jerusalem, the city of Jerusalem, the physical city itself. That is going to war with God, according to John, the Revelator. So that's why he's saying it that way. So it's not a bunch of guys show up in a big field in Megiddo and say, hey, I'm going to shoot a missile, an invisible spaghetti monster in the sky that I don't even believe in. No, they're going after Jerusalem. It's being prophesied that that's going. And I don't know if y'all noticed, but every time you watch the news, they trying to go after Jerusalem now. Nothing's going to change. Well, yeah, it is. Donald Trump's going to. I don't care what Trump does. We're going to get here. I'm not. I know a bunch of you just hair stood up on the back of your neck when I said that. I'm not bashing the president. I'm saying prophecy will be fulfilled, whether in his lifetime or when he's dead and gone. But this is going to happen, and it's always been going on, no matter what. And anyway. I won't even get into the Gaza Strip stuff. Verse 15, we went through, we went through 14 and 15. Behold, let me do 14. And they are demonic spirits performing signs and go abroad to the kings of the whole world. So it doesn't have to be a little, you go, no, there's like one king left. No, we're talking about leaders. Political leaders, powerful, the people that are really in charge. They're going to go to them, and they're going to assemble them for battle on the great day of God Almighty. Verse 15, Jesus says, behold, I am coming like a thief. Blessed is the one who stays awake, keeping his garments on, that he might not go out naked and be seen exposed. So here's this warning, boom, the second coming. So in the midst of all this guy knows Jesus will be coming back. They're trying to get war against everybody. Now, in Acts chapter 1, 9 through 11, we've got where we've been looking for Jesus to come back. They told us. And when he said these things, as they were looking on, and he was lifted up, and a cloud took him out of their sight. So all the disciples are there gawking at this spectacle. In verse 10, and while they were gazing into the heavens, as he went, behold, two men, these are angels, stood by in white robes. Next verse. And he said, men of Galilee, why do you stand here looking into heaven? This Jesus who was taken up from you into heaven will come in the same way as you saw him go into heaven. So that's what we've been looking for. Now when he says he's going to come quickly in other verses, it doesn't mean he's coming immediately. It just means when I come, it's going to be like a thief in the night. And it's going to be boom, and nobody's expecting it. No man knows the hour, no man knows the time. And when I come, it's going to be according to the time that God has set in place, and I'm going to come back. So this verse is not referring to the rapture of any church. It's referring to the second coming. And the saints of God are supposed to be encouraged to keep the faith. This is not all there is. There's more. And he'll come, and he'll come like a thief. The world's not going to see it happen. The world is setting it, the stage is being set for this war between Jerusalem and all the world and all this stuff. Remember, we got the Antichrist in place. We got the mark of the beast been rocking along. We got the beast, the false prophets. We've got all this going on all around the world. And here we go, where it's about to come down. And then verse 16, he gathered them into the place called in the Hebrew tongue Armageddon. Okay, now it's interesting. We're looking in Greek and Aramaic and Hebrew here. So when the Greek refers to the Greek reader to say in the Hebrew tongue, there's a reason for that. They had a Greek word for Armageddon. They could have used that, but they went with the Hebrew. I got a theory about that. Okay, it's very interesting to me. So remember, these armies have been assembled by Satan to destroy God. All right. Verse 14 said that they're being gathered to do battle on the great day. So they go for war, and then verse 16 says he gathered them together. So the enemy, Satan, the devil, the Antichrist, he thinks he's still in control, but he's not. All right. He gathers the nations. Now, is he coming to Megiddo? That word Armageddon in the Hebrew. Let me get back to that. So the traditional that you probably heard is there's a valley, Megiddo, and that's where the battle is going to take place. It's that famous valley where Napoleon showed up and said, this is a natural battlefield. There is this place, and I have actually been there. And believe it or not, an old boy from Talladega, Alabama, standing right there. And I said, my goodness, it's huge. It's like a giant football field. And there's a place over here, and there's a place over here. It's like stands, and it's just flat, as far as you can see, and it gets cloudy. You can't even see. And it's this huge, flat field, and they call it Megiddo. And so everybody has always kind of assumed that that's the place where this battle is going to take place. The armies of the world are going to come together and shake their fist at Almighty God and say, let's go to war. And I've always looked at that and went, that's weird. And I've seen some weird stuff here, okay? But that ball, how do we're going to go with bullets against an invisible force? Doesn't make any sense. So then, started studying. And when it says Hebrew is called Armageddon, why did they have to say that? When you see something weird, there's a reason you usually want to dig it out. And you say, well, for the love, tell us. All right. The word here is Armageddon, and in that, the H-A-R of Armageddon would be in the beginning of it, and it means a mountain. Well, the problem is, there ain't no mountain at Megiddo. It's a big flat valley. As flat as anywhere you've ever seen. Jerusalem is the bill. They may gather in Megiddo to come and prepare to attack Jerusalem. Logically, that works. It's like a giant area. Every military man plane and stuff. Place up if you're going to Jerusalem, probably was. Planes. The stronghold of David in attacking Jerusalem itself. Because there ain't nothing in Megiddo to go fight over. It's just a big old flat field. It'd be like me and one of y'all saying, let's go get in a fight. Where you want to get in a fight? Out there in that ditch? Why do we want to fight in that ditch? I don't know, but we're going to do it. Somebody else fought in that ditch years ago, and Napoleon said that's a good place to fight. Let's go fight in that ditch. Doesn't make any sense. But it makes sense to go attack Jerusalem. That makes all the sense in the world, and it fits in because you got to have the mountain. And then you got the scriptures about Jesus standing on one side, he's standing on the Mount of Olives, and the other one he's standing on Jerusalem. So you got a lot of significance that comes around. In Revelation chapter 14, it's connected with Babylon and talked about being Mount Zion. You've heard the term Mount Zion in chapter 14, talking about Jerusalem over and over. So anyway, that's fine though. If you want to go Megiddo, knock yourself out. If you want to come over with me in Jerusalem, that's fine. We can all love each other and we can still have fellowship. It does not matter in the end, because I'm going to be sitting up in heaven going, my, I guess I was wrong. And I'm okay being wrong when I'm there. That might be why He's going to wipe away every tear from my eye when I realize how wrong I've been. But this final judgment, what's being destroyed here? Not just the heavens and the earth, but the world system, that new world order that comes into play. And that's what all the mark of the beast and everything's about. There's going to be a new world system, a one world currency. You go, now you're getting conspiracy theory. No, the Bible's been talking about that long before there was weird podcasts. Okay, that stuff's been going on. But this is the beginning of ending a rebellion against God and a system that has been punishing and killing God's children. And He is going to put an end to it. And He's going to bring justice, and He's going to make things right. And the bowls are going to be poured out, so as we saw in the first part of Revelation 16. And the bowls are poured out, and He will say, it is done, which is a lot like when Jesus said on the cross, it is finished. You know, we've come to that point. At the cross, Jesus announced victory, and He has victory, but the verdict has yet to come down. And at the cross, it was joy that He cried for the judgment of this world. But on this day, we'll have judgment coming finally. It's like when you say, you've won, but we haven't prosecuted yet. We're waiting for the other shoe to drop. So He's letting us know, now we've reached judgment. Let's look at verse 18. And there were flashes of lightning and rumbling and peals of thunder and a great earthquake such as there had never been since man was on the earth. And y'all remember in a few places of Revelation, we've had some earthquakes that were major, and here we go, this is even bigger. So great was the earthquake. Verse 19. And the great city, that could be Jerusalem, was split into three parts, and the cities of the nations fell. And we talk about Babylon the Great. And God remembered Babylon to make drain up of the fury of His wrath, to drink. I need some glasses to drink of His wrath. All right, let's jump. And every mountains were there to be hailstone 100 pounds. That's Exodus. From the earth on the crushed the plague of the hail. The plague was so severe. All right, it was so great. So back at verse 19, the great city here probably refers to Jerusalem itself. Okay, and the great city was split into three parts. And that's another why this Armageddon battles have something to do with Jerusalem. The battle's going on, the earthquake comes. You got in verse 19, when it says a great Babylon came, and that's in 19, yes. And make her drain. So Babylon here, that's again, Babylon represents the symbol of pride between men and God, and the Tower of Babel, all that stuff I told you about in the beginning. Ancient Babylon, it doesn't necessarily mean it has anything to do with Iran or Iraq. This is language that the Bible would use. God has been in the process of judging the earth all through the tribulation period, and now we're coming to the point, here is basically the final stroke, where God destroys any semblance of any human power. And when we get into the parts, we got the earthquakes and all this stuff occurring. We got the great city in verse 18. All the other cities of the earth. All right. And then we get into, in verse 20, where he talks about the islands being fled away and everything. This is more than likely that destruction I was reading to you from Peter in Revelation 21 in the beginning. That everything's being destroyed. This elemental fire, the elements of everything burning up. So how should we live, Peter said? Well, we should live like none of this is going to last. But the things that are going to last, the things that are eternal, are the things of God. So if you focus your energy, and you focus your prayers, and you focus your money and your time on the things of God and His kingdom, that's the stuff that will be with you and waiting for you and your reward in eternity. But the things you focus on here, what does it matter if God's going to burn it all up and make a new heaven and a new earth anyway? I mean, I know I was just talking to somebody about getting a driveway put in. Why would I do a driveway if God's going to burn it all up anyway? Well, in the meantime, I'm tired of having a muddy car. Nothing wrong with not wanting to have a muddy car every time it rains, and have the UPS guy doing donuts in my yard. But there's nothing wrong with you having stuff. There's nothing wrong with you spending some money. There's nothing wrong with you focusing on things that make you comfortable, but at the same time, keep in mind, it's all going to burn up one day anyway. And if all we care about and all we worry about is something that is temporary, and it is way more temporary than this, because probably none of this is going to happen in our lifetime. I don't know that. I might be wrong. For in the pulpit, you're going to die. Leave it. What's the worth of it? I want my kids to have, and I don't want my kids to struggle, but I'm really focused on things that are eternal. And the phones and all that stuff is just more explanation of that. All right. But we have that men blaspheme God because of the plagues of the hail, for the plagues therefore exceedingly great. So they're still cursing God. We saw that in chapter 15 too. I mean, God keeps bringing judgment, and what do? They don't go, oh, Lord, forgive us. No, they hunker in. They hunker in. You say, yeah, but God is doing this to them. He's a mean God. He's saying, no, don't forget. He already gave the world His only begotten Son. And if you continue to reject Jesus, that's constantly sitting in the face of God and going through His mercy over and over and saying, thank you, I don't need you. No, thank you, I don't need you. And then when judgment comes because He gave you His Son and you reject His Son, and then you want to get mad at God. You have to work that out between you and God. But that's where we